Feel free to return to our channel at any time. Strolling along a serene New York alleyway as the sun sets, Patti Smith is encased in her lengthy black cloak. With her notebook tucked under her arm and her boots leaving punctuation marks on the pavement, she set off on her journey. She is preoccupied with others' needs rather than her own. The musicians whose work moved her, the songs whose melodies sustained her untamed spirit. Her admiration is not casual. Her acclaim is hard-won, gleaned from candor and drenched in experience. Patti was not only impacted by these five musicians, they were the spark that ignited her. Bob Dylan, the prophet she formerly referred to as a brother, is where it all starts. Dylan wasn't merely a musician to Patti. He embodied tradition. Brutal, abstract, spiritual, and full of fire were his early song lyrics. With tears streaming down her face, she first heard, "Hey, hard rains are gonna fall," while sitting on the floor of a college dorm. That person's voice did not seek authorization. It dictated to your spirit. Because of this, she felt less isolated in her frustration, her inquiries, and her unfiltered, urgent want to express herself. It wasn't about fame, but reverence. When they met years later, he nodded, half grinned, and said little, but being in his presence was like hearing scripture read aloud, and Patti approached him as a disciple, not a peer. For days, she couldn't shake that fleeting conversation, awkward and sacred. She documented her experiences in her writings in the manner of a priest documenting a vision. Their connection was subtle, strange, silent, and magnetic all at once. At several performances and rehearsals throughout the years, they would cross paths, exchanging knowing glances and treating each other with the utmost respect. Sitting silently next to him at a benefit performance in the 90s was an occasion she'll never forget. "You still write with fire," he said. Silence eluded her. She could have skipped it. There was a sense of anthem in that moment. Dylan loosened all the screws for her. He normalized being both passionate and poetic. He authorized her to dwell in the gray area between the holy and the profane, utter words in tongues that had not yet been translated. And he's there with her every time she takes the stage. After that, Keith Richards, the rumble that accompanies the wrath. A sacrament, if Dylan were scripture, would be Keith. Truth was more important to Patti than Polish. And the Gospel of rawness sounded like Keith's guitar to her. Rock was more than simply a genre for the Rolling Stones. It was their blood. The driving force behind it all was Keith, who snarled like a cigarette and had shattered teeth. As a musician, he was more than that. Divinely destructive, unpredictable, and electric. He was a natural disaster waiting to happen. Backstage in the late 1970s, they crossed paths in a smoky room. According to her, he resembled a ghost who had managed to survive a battle. All he did was offer her something to drink, light up another cigarette, and laugh. It was communion, not discourse, that ensued. Rimbaud and Chuck Berry quotations were half finished, and their speech was a jumble of riffs. Lenny, Richard, Soul, and I were the last to enter, followed by the rest of the band. We were already constituted. She perceived in him a fellow wild guy, one who turned anguish into rhythm and who never once tried to hide his wild side. Rather than being consumed by sadness, her 3 poems that night were fueled by an intense rush of energy. Rock wasn't supposed to be submissive, Keith told her. It was supposed to shout. Later on, while she was recording her most unpolished and distorted songs, she could still hear his spirit smiling through the distortion. Janis Joplin, the ghost with flame hair, arrived afterward. Patti dealt with her loss as if she were a family member, even though they never met. On one occasion, she remarked that Janis sung as if struggling for her life. It was all right to be unpolished, that voice told Patti, rough, broken, honest. It was preferable to be excessive than insufficient. Janis did a lot more than sing. Bleeding was her result. It was her solo act. Unleashed she did. Somehow, Janis's scream had the effect of a tempest ripping the heart wide. The earthquake reverberated through Patti's ribs, and she felt it in her chest. She lay motionless on her bed, her heart racing, and tears flowing down her face as the words "ball and chain" from her lips. Feeling as if she had just reconnected with an estranged sibling via vinyl records and static. That was no musical performance. Survival was key. In her apartment, with the lights turned down low, incense burning, and quiet tears streaming down her cheeks, Patti would listen to Janis. Not merely admiration. The bond was one of blood. The two ladies were too emotional, too complicated, and too wild for their time to be packaged well. Patti learned from Janice that vulnerability might be fortified, feeling that agony could actually be a strength, not a breakdown, that yelling, a language existed. She pictured Janice behind the scenes, in the middle of all the mayhem, but somehow still by himself. Patti knew the pain of being both loved and misunderstood, and she also knew the loneliness of overcrowded green rooms. Janice exuded an ethereal quality, his presence raw and bright while he was already passing away. Because of it, Patti started writing and living with more abandon, and she started screaming more freely. A lyric is included in each scream, wail, every drunken, rebellious slur. Patti discovered bravery. Because of it, she wanted to shout more, write more, and love more fiercely. Tears streamed down her face as she sang a cover of Piece of My Heart in a little bar in 1980. Recognized, not out of regret. The sensation was similar to embracing a timeless figure, even if they had never crossed paths. A woman whose passion was too great for the world to contain, Janice was both a curse and a blessing, a tragic hero. In addition, whenever Patti uses a microphone to let out a scream, she always makes sure to broadcast it into space, in case Janice happens to be listening. John Coltrane was the fourth, and he was a rhythm monk. Few would have thought to include him on her list. Coltrane, though, wasn't merely jazz to Patti. He had a profound impact. His voice sounded like a violent spirit. A saxophone cried out a violent meditation. The music did more than only pose inquiries. It was inquisitive. With the lights off and the incense wafting up into the ceiling, Patti would sit in her East Village apartment and listen to a Love Supreme on repeat until the room shook. He seemed more than just taking notes, in her opinion. Reality itself was being torn to shreds by him. It was Coltrane who taught her that discord could be devotion and that disorder could be sacred. Only he, she added, had ever shown her the ropes of prayer. As she lay on the floor, eyes closed and hands open, she would listen to his melodic breaks. There was nothing flashy about his runs. This was a ceremonial. Even in a single syllable, he could detect suffering, submerge it in a deluge of implausible chords. Patti frequently remarked that Coltrane sounded like a guy attempting to break free, both physically and from the constraints of the page. While listening to John Coltrane, she composed her first spoken word work. Breath, pulse, and sweat made up the rhythm, not lyrical meter. She learned to be silent from his notes. Structure was taught to her by his anarchy. His suffering imparted grace to her. There was more invocation than performance in his music. Their paths crossed only in her fantasies. During her most reflective moments, she claims to hear his trumpet echoing in the background of her poetry, as if it were a ghost directing her hand. While Dylan was a poet, he was also a jazz musician and scripture singer. Coltrane embodied dedication and harmony. Dylan became Patti's go-to source for answers. Coltrane was the one she turned to for faith when she needed it. The man who gave her new life, Kurt Cobain, comes last. Years later, a child of indifference and cacophony, he arrived. His voice, though, reflected Patti's own adolescence. Nirvana failed to notice grunge when she broke through. Words of prophecy were revealed to her. Kurt's voice lacked refinement and accuracy. It broke precisely where it needed to. Striving for beauty was not its goal. It gnawed at reality. In her London hotel room, she listened to music that sounded like Teen Spirit and described the sensation as a blow to the chest, but it was the manner in which it came to her undoing. It sounded more like a murmured wound than a song. He mirrored her younger self in many ways. She pleaded quietly for someone to listen without attempting to change him, and she saw fury as a front for loneliness. They never actually met, but they exchanged letters, short, odd, battered things. She was thanked for the horses in one. Also in another, she sent him Rambo's one phrase in an email. I am not myself. Even though she didn't anticipate it, he never responded in writing. Upon his passing, Patti prayed and lighted a candle. Grief for a Boy I Never Held, she titled it. Not long at all. Friends say she reads it every year on April 5th and has a copy of Bleach next to her typewriter, but she has never revealed it publicly. His feedback, vulnerability, and wrath beg for nothing more but to be heard. She feels him all. Kurt is at his most intimate, blazing, misunderstood, holy moment when the lights go out and her voice cracks right before the verse. The spotlight has never been on Patti Smith. The kind of truth that doesn't seek praise but reverberates through empty notebooks and basement clubs was her sacred ground. Comprehending it is essential. It wasn't necessarily the most outspoken musicians who moved her. It was the ones who were genuine. The rule breakers, not the recorders. Those who created music for physiological rather than aesthetic reasons. These five failed to provide her with motivation. They gave her the green light to squat, yell, speak in incomplete phrases, and prey on song. They served as a gentle reminder to her that art isn't perfect. Pain, unpredictability, and tenacity are where it's at. She was unmotivated to mimic them. They challenged her to delve deeper, stay odd, write when nobody was looking, and sing when her voice broke. They also said she may burn. They were the specters on her keyboard, the rumble in her voice, and the cadence in her step as she stalked the night on her alone. Reason being, Patti Smith's music was never her profession. A holy communion. The weight of quiet was a secret shared between souls, in defiance of polish. A holy ceremony of becoming and shattering. Moreover, these five weren't merely favorites. They were the holy ring around her. They aren't for her to recall, to feel. She plays them. Their spark in her never died. Its shape was merely altered. Furthermore, in her songs, poetry, and stillness, they are immortal.